morning, Leader.
Right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, committee and anybody else who happens to be watching. Welcome to December's meeting of the County Council Executives. So I'll start with item 1 then, which is apologies for absence, please.
Thank
Are
you.
there any?
Thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Mrs Bradwell.
Thank you. Any item 2 then? Any declarations of councillors' interest, please? There are none indicated, so thank you for that. I'll then move on to announcements by the Leader, Executive Councillors and Executive Directors. Are there any announcements from any of you? Okay, that's all quiet, thank you. So straight on to item 4 then, which is minutes of the meeting of this Executive Committee, which was held on the 7th of November. Is it your wish I sign these as a true and accurate record? Is that agreed? Anybody dissenting? No? Okay, thank you very much. Okay then, so then we move on to the first substantive item, which is the Wellbeing Service recommissioning. So, Councillor Bowkett, thank you.
Thank you. Right, so this is the Wellbeing Service. We're looking to recommission this. The service was last recommissioned in 2018, and I think we'll all agree that it's an excellent service. And has had over 39,000 residents applied to it over that last 5 years. So it's certainly a well-used service. It does need a little change now, so we are looking at it, and we're looking to go out for a 10-year with a 5-year break. So Tony is going to present this now and give you a short presentation on it.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. As Councillor Bowkett suggests, the service has been a long-standing part of the preventative array of services that we offer to the communities of Lincolnshire. The service started in 2014 and was last procured in 2018. It's changed quite a lot over its lifespan, both in terms of provider model, exactly what types of service it provides, and so on. We started a review earlier on in the year, largely because there's a lot of changes happened in the health and care system over the life of the service from 2014. Onwards, and it was important to check the relevance, fit, and gapping and overlapping of the service in its current model before we decided what to do with it going forward. So we've done probably a review in a slightly faster time than we might normally do a review, but having said that, it's been a very thorough review with all of the key ingredients of a review included in it, and those are described in the report around service user engagement, public engagement, some market engagement, talking to stakeholders about how useful the service is and how it fits into the system of services that we offer to Lincolnshire. Fundamentally, as Councillor Bowkett said, the service has been evaluated as being a good service, good at achieving what we set out for it to achieve in 2014, and has been quite a flexible vehicle for us to do some other things which we couldn't have planned in 2014 but needed to respond to support communities through some really very odd times like the COVID pandemic, for example. So all in all, the service is evaluated well, stakeholders value it, service users value it. However, there were some elements of the service that we found were less well utilised, less effective, and or had been overtaken by developments in the wider system of health and social care services. So whilst we are, when we loop around to the recommendations, recommending that we do continue to commission a wellbeing service, we're recommending that we go out to the market with it because the model will be somewhat different. We've concluded that the model that we need going forward is somewhat different to the model of service as it currently exists. So if I focus down a little bit on some of the things that we're changing or proposing to change about the service based on the decision this morning, we concluded that it's important that this, because it's a preventative service, that it continues to be relatively low threshold and easy to access for the population. It needs to be relatively easy to access if it's going to get people early in their journey towards losing their independence and head them off in a different direction. Having said that, the current service access thresholds and management of access are looser than we would want them to be, especially as we expect to see continued growth in demand, both from demography of our population and the complexity of people with multiple illnesses living longer. And sorry, will do. Sorry. Absolutely. So we're expecting the demand for these kinds of services to continue to go up. Our population's getting older, and our older people have more complex needs as their life expectancy increases. So what we need to do is have some different eligibility criteria in there, which are a little bit more focused on self-service and on directing people at the front door to things they can readily access themselves without going through formal assessment processes for this kind of more structured service, and then be really clear about the eligibility for access to the service so that we can manage that and control access over time if resources start to struggle with the demand for access to the service. So we're going to change the front door somewhat, is the upshot of that. We're going to move more towards strength-based access to services, so starting the conversation with people about what they want to achieve, what they can do for themselves, and what they need a little bit of help with from services like the wellbeing service, because that's an important general strategic move in our conversation with people who need services. Other changes that we're proposing on making then, we are going to push harder on small aids and adaptations in people's houses. Evidence base is really clear that they're really important and they're really valuable to people. We're going to make access to these slightly simpler for people, so things that they might have had to go somewhere else for before, we will be able to do in the wellbeing service through delegation from adult social care occupational therapy teams, so people can do things in one step rather than two steps when they need them. We will be encouraging. Sorry, lost my train of thought there. So, then in terms of other changes to the service, we currently operate a model where we send workers into hospitals to try and find people who might benefit from wellbeing services when they're ready to come out of hospital. Our review found that is now a very crowded space. There are lots of other organisations operating in hospital discharge environments, and our workers are not adding sufficient value for us to want to continue to have dedicated outreach. Doesn't mean we won't see people in hospital and assess them and plan with them, but we won't have the proposal is we won't have dedicated teams sitting in hospitals going forward. One of the other things that we currently do is we provide a service that can resettle people into home from hospital later on in the evening when other services might not be available. Again, we find this part of the service is very poorly utilised, largely because of other providers in that part of the marketplace, and because discharges tend not to happen as late in the day as they might have done when we first initiated the service, so less necessary. Again, the service will be able to plan to make sure people's homes are ready for them to come home to, but we won't have people sitting on standby waiting to meet people at home. Would be the change proposal there. Fundamentally, other than that, the service will be the same as it is now, because those other service elements all evaluated really strongly with service users, with our outcomes and outputs from contract management, and with other stakeholders. The plan, should we get a positive decision this morning on the recommendations that we've made, is to go out by competitive tender. We think the service has changed significantly enough to warrant putting it back out to the market. Again, our proposal at the moment is that we will go out at a fixed budget for the service, because we need to hold that financial control, and that we'll be looking for providers to talk to us about the volume, quality and delivery rather than the price, particularly for the service. As Councillor Bokit alluded originally, our recommendation is that we go out for a 10-year contract with a 5-year break in it to give us management flexibility, and of course because the whole health and social care system will keep changing and developing over time, and it's important that we review these kinds of services periodically to check that they still fit. I've probably done a really bad job of talking about the commercial elements of the service here, so I'll let my colleague Carl come in to give you a quick update on the commercial approach we're proposing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Delivery of the new service will remain by way of a single county-wide service. That will not preclude partnerships or consortia and subcontracting models, which are common in services of a broad scope like this one, and which can offer effective and efficient delivery solutions. The payment mechanism will be broadly consistent with the current model, incorporating a fixed or a block payment element for delivery of the core service and the associated delivery volumes. Bidders will submit costs up to, but not exceeding, the fixed sum confirmed by the council prior to publication of the tender, and included as part of their pricing submission, bidders will be required to submit details of the service volumes and outcomes achievable within their respective delivery solutions, subject to the minimum expectations having been set by the council being met. Unit prices for specific service elements will also be established and used as the basis for an additional volume-based payment mechanism should demand exceed the service delivery volumes that will be finalised during the tender process. Payment for any services beyond the maximum available budget will be subject to prior approval by the council, and we will reserve the right to prioritise service element streams or to adjust the eligibility thresholds should costs approach the available budget, in order to make sure we're maximising the use of available resources. Demand for the current service model is forecast to increase beyond the capacity of the current model. So the redesign and efficiencies that Tony's described have been required to help to mitigate that risk, and demand management will be achieved through the potential for adjustment to the entry and eligibility criteria, or indeed through the provision of additional funding and resources should they be available and that be desirable. The contract will be monitored as an open book arrangement to enable us to have an understanding of the costs of delivery for discrete elements of the service and to understand how those costs link to the volumes of services delivered. And that will support the demand and cost management by giving visibility of delivery costs alongside the activity. Plus that will give us visibility of any efficiencies delivered through the core service elements, which can then be apportioned via a gain share mechanism that will be included in the contract. Performance monitoring will still be driven by service user outcome measures, but will also include the measurement and monitoring of the timeliness of service interventions to support risk mitigation for individuals being supported by the service. And then just to touch briefly on the budget implications, the redesign will help to release some resources by removing the less effective elements of the current service, by seeking to divert some of the more routine needs to other services, particularly financial support aspects, where those needs can be better met by other commissioned services, and then by building in more controls to access the service and thus enabling the service to be recommissioned within the existing budget of £3.3 million per annum. And then the competitive process, the tender process, will test the deliverability of the revised service model within the constraints of the available confirmed budget to determine the service volumes and outcomes achievable within the respective delivery solutions. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll come to the scrutiny comments in a minute. I think, no, we'll do scrutiny now. I don't know how you're doing, Councillor Stokes. You'll get, because obviously Councillor Marfleet can't be here today. So there's quite substantial scrutiny comments, aren't there?
Yes, thank you, Leader. So on the 29th of November, the Adults and Community Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee agreed to support the recommendations to the Executive as set out on page 12 of the Executive's agenda and report bundle. The Wellbeing Service represents a key element in the overall aim of supporting prevention with the intention of improving the quality of life of individuals as well as reducing costs on other adult social care and health services. The committee also agreed to make the following comments with regards to preventing falls, the flexibility of the contract, the feedback from service users, service performance, working with partners and information on the service. I can go individually through each paragraph if you would like, Leader.
I think that'll be all right, so I'll just pick out any, but if you want to go through everyone, you're very welcome.
Thank you. So with regards to preventing falls, the committee was advised that there were typically 50,000 falls per annum in Lincolnshire involving people aged over 65, which led to considerable costs for both adult social care and health services. The committee would like to emphasise the role of the wellbeing service practitioners in providing advice and guidance to prevent people falling at home. For example, advising on space for people to move about their home with mobility aids and addressing trip risks such as rugs or household clutter. With regards to flexibility of contract, the committee would like to emphasise the benefits of a 10-year contract with a break option after 5 years. This provides a balance between flexibility to add, remove or fine-tune services in the contract. For example, after 5 years, for example, after 5 years, and the certainty for the provider of the service to commit resources to the longer term. With regards to feedback from service users, the committee suggests that each time a service user leaves the wellbeing service, they are provided an opportunity to provide feedback on whether all the needs they brought to the service have been successfully closed. This will provide a source of information for the consideration of future developments.
Can we just deal with those? Because I think that's the first substantive recommendation. So comments on that, please. Is that possible to achieve, or on that particular recommendation from the Scrutiny Committee?
Yes, that's fundamentally what we've proposed is a 10-year maximum life on the contract with a formal
item 3, which is feedback from service users.
Yeah, interestingly, we do take the service takes feedback from service users at the end of each of their episodes with the service, because we measure the outcomes that they say they've achieved on it. This for benefit of executive was in the context of the 12-week point at which we would normally only stay alongside a service user for 12 weeks, and some questioning about whether after the 12 weeks had ended, if someone's needs hadn't been met, what happened then. So we are taking feedback from services.
Well, it's a yes or no. After 12 weeks, will you be offering people the opportunity to feedback?
Yes.
Quite a simple question.
Yes, we do that
okay,
already.
Right.
Yeah.
Move on then. Thank you, Councillor Stokes.
Thank you. With regards to service performance, the committee supports the planned key performance indicators for the new contract. These will help to ensure service standards are maintained throughout Lincolnshire, including in each district council area. Working with partners such as community health services in the NHS should continue both to aid and complement service departments, but also to ensure that any duplication is avoided. This could include consideration of use of the Lincolnshire One public estate with facilities connected by public transport, promoting healthier lifestyles in advance of old age, and ensuring a relevant support in district councils, such as housing services are signposted when required.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. So on that, obviously part of your sort of reshaping the service was about putting signposting people to the right place, you know, for example, in terms of financial issues. So what's going to change from the current contract? How will you improve that so we make sure that people get the right service from the right people.
So for the new contract, all services or initial referrals, wherever they come from, will go through our CSC into the first step of triaging, and they'll either go to the wellbeing service or they'll go to one of the other services that we know are available to local people. So that is a change, because at the moment some of the activity goes through our CSC, some goes directly to the service provider, and that's sometimes a source of confusion. So that's one change that we will...
So it'll all be triaged by the CSC?
Everything will be
triaged. And they'll
by
be
the
clear, obviously a criteria will be built up so that the CSC have clear criteria where they can put people to the right place for them and indeed for the council.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that's a definite change. The approach to digital access to the service is where some of the confusion CQC identified, and that's largely because when people Google search for the service, it's very easy to find, but what we have to some extent now is there might be something about the wellbeing service on one district council site which looks slightly different to the landing page on another district council site, for example, because they're covering those services, and clearly we need to unify that going forward with the new model.
So what you're saying, that whoever the provider is, they will have the same, even if it's split up across the county, whoever it might be, they will have the same landing page on, you know, so there's one place to go to.
One landing page, where whoever's website you land on. Yes.
So it'll all look the same and it'll go the same, it'll push them back to our CSC.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Adam?
So, and the final area, thank you, Leader, is the information on the service. Following the report of the Care Quality Commission, the committee also agrees that it's not easy to navigate web pages and not always clear to understand who provides the Lincolnshire Wellbeing Service. The committee suggests that the landing pages after internet searches are standardised to make it clearer who provides the service and who to contact in each individual's area. The Lincolnshire Wellbeing Service has a good brand identity and could also promote other services linked to prevention.
Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you,
that was
Leader.
covered in the previous item, was it not?
Yeah, the solutions overlap with each other.
Because,
I think.
there'll be one place to go
Yes.
and not around the houses. Okay, thank you for that. Can I just want to explore the commissioning arrangements, because obviously you've, as I understand it, the current providers have managed to manage inflation and the increased numbers within the budget envelope which was set. So can you a bit more clarity on how it will, because obviously you've said, well, the new bidders can go up to a certain figure, and as long as they don't exceed that figure, that's okay. So I'm just, in terms of how that is going to work, and just to be clear, you were saying that the activity will be on a certain, they'll bid to do X at a certain rate, and then that will just multiply up depending on the numbers. Is that have I got that right?
So there will be a core payment, a block payment that will represent the delivery of the volumes that, in excess of our minimum predicted demand, they bid back to us during the tender process. So we'll be paying for the core services, and we'll be seeking to maximise through the tender process the volumes and the outcomes that can be achieved for that core payment. Should we get to a point where, because we know demand through demographic growth is increasing, and it's increased, although it's been managed very well within the budget available through the provider of the current service, it's not likely to be able to sustain continued growth beyond that level significantly. However, the mechanisms, improving demand management, improving the front door, and removing the elements of service that haven't proved as successful should enable us to manage more within the existing budget. So,
what percentage of is the core, and what percentage of the total presumed money is, how much is core contract and how much is variable?
So we'll be having the variable mechanism only if we get to the point where we exceed what we predict and the bidders tell us they can deliver within the budget envelope, which will be up to, not necessarily at, but up to the maximum available budget. So and then beyond that, if demand continues to grow, there will be an opportunity for us either to look at whether we are able to, and it is desirable to put additional resources in and fund through the additional volume payment mechanism, or alternatively we'll implement demand management strategies whereby we are tightening the eligibility criteria to manage the flow and target the resources at those most in need.
Okay, so just coming back to appreciate there's more inflation now and there's more demand, but at the same time there'll be less, you're actually, the front door will be more efficient, shall we say, so a lot of people will be diverted to the correct place. So have you an estimate of how many current clients will actually be diverted in future and not actually be used by them? Because what I'm trying to understand is how will you know, when people come forward with their bids, that you must have some idea so you can assess whether the bids are actually best value or not.
Absolutely. So there's work ongoing now to finalise the demand projections based on the revised service eligibility criteria, so that we can predict and we can include in the tender documentation a reasonable and realistic estimate of what we expect demand to be going through the wellbeing service in the new model.
What I'm trying to get at, obviously the providers might have a different view to us, so I'm just wondering how the challenge will happen when will you know what the presumed effect of the suppression of demand is?
I mean, the market engagement we've done so far earlier in the year has suggested that we can continue at broadly at current levels. Now,
but what I'm getting at, is it a 30% reduction on current, 20%, 10%? You must have some idea, because if people are going to the right place, finance is one of them where they should go to.
So,
and you must have some idea, because you must know what the current activity is, because I know you do, because
yes,
the figures are there,
in the region of 9,000.
You should be able to predict, tell the committee within a broad, sort of ballpark figure of what percentage of people will have probably a better result somewhere else, which will then soak up the additional demand.
So we do have an idea of that, because what we're fundamentally doing is taking out some of the people with simple or single issues from the people who would otherwise land in the. The margin in the numbers at the moment is about 800 to 1,000 people that would just not get through, would be diverted away. That's a slightly less than 10%. Given this is about 9,000 people moving through the city. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm not sure which numbers.
Okay. Well, I think coming to the financial issues, the volumes that were being shown were much higher than 10%, more like 40%. So I just wonder, I have a question, query, are you sure you've got your figures right? Well, my phone's off, by the way. So
Yeah.
I did.
We are sure we are sure that the figures are right. We're still finishing some of the modelling. I think picking up Carl's point, but what we're seeing differentiation here is some of the outcomes being claimed by people exiting the service were not reasons why they asked to enter the service in the first place. So some of the difference in the numbers.
I'm saying, is that 10% figure, how robust is your 10% of sort of diverting demand? I'm going to let Martin come in. Thank you.
So I absolutely recognise the issues you're talking about. I'll happy to give the executive a commitment that I'll work with the team to make sure that before we go out to tender, we have robust figures that we can put in the documentation that say this is what the current demand is. This is what we think the impact of the changes that we've made in the specification will be. This is what we think the future demand will be, so that organisations that are looking to tender have a clear sense of this is what the fixed budget is, and this is what the estimated demand will be, and this is the way that we calculate it, and we'll make sure that that's done before we go out to
I mean, to be fair to the bidders, they need to know where they stand. Otherwise, they will, I think, we need to be very clear about what the expectation is, including how to manage the increased demand and then all the rest of it. Because I presume you can predict the increased demand just on the population statistics, can't you? On that. Okay, right, further comments. Councillor Davies.
Thank you. Just a couple of queries, really, if I can. I noticed the rate of external referrers has shot up quite markedly. Is that a question of better penetration, or is that more service users? Is my first question. Should we do them one at a time? Is that right?
For me, that's better penetration rather than more service users.
Well, that's a good news story, actually, isn't it? Because it is a good service, and I was particularly pleased to hear talk about minor interventions, because I think that can make a real difference. One slightly more concerning, you mentioned a couple of times when you were talking, and it tallies with my experience of kind of overlap and a bit, it's almost as if I've got this vision of the hospital discharge, lots of people standing around with leaflets trying to thrust them under people's faces. I know there is a bit of a, let's be honest, lots of organisations that claim to be charities aren't really charities in a conventional sense. Are people chasing money because this is a growth area?
I think it's definitely a growth area, and I think it's definitely a growth area, and there is an extent to which there are some provider organisations who are choosing where the low-hanging fruit is, rather than where maybe some of the more difficult work is. And obviously hospitals are a glowing 24-hour symbol of the health and social care system 7 days a week, and if you want to go and find people who might need services, they're a relatively easy place to find people. So there may be some of the fact that space is crowded because it's a relatively easy place for a range of different providers to be operating. So there is definitely something about that, I think. And chasing the money, I'm not so sure. Whether that's what's driving them, or whether it's they just want to get at people that they think they can help, and it's a relatively easy place to find them.
Yeah, if I could come in and give a slightly more positive explanation, and I think that this is week 5. Councillor Bowkett no doubt will be able to say exactly which day it is for me, but week 5. One of the things that I'm seeing is that there's clearly been a great deal of innovation across the system over the last several years. Lots of really interesting schemes and projects been put in place, lots of interesting pathways. There's a lot of benefit in that. One of the things I think that I'm finding is that that's led to a slightly messy system in various places. Yeah. This isn't the only one where I think we're now at a stage, there's been a great deal of very positive innovation. A step now is to say, let's take a step back, look at what has become a slightly complex field, and codify and make sure that that's absolutely coherent. So I think the conversation that we're having here, some of the things that Tony's talked about, are an expression of that we've put in various things that we thought might help. Some of them have helped, some of them have been less effective, some of them have ended up being slightly duplicative of each other. We're taking the advantage of this new tender process to say, okay, let's simplify, let's make sure that we focus on the things that are working, take away some of the things that either aren't working, aren't being used, or perhaps are duplicating. There is a further process to be gone through in other areas, but I think it's the next step on from the burst of innovation, as opposed to a situation where providers are manipulating the system.
Okay, just one question on the commercials, really. You talk about a schedule of rates, which makes sense. How, having seen this not work terribly well in places, how rigorous are we testing that schedule of rates so that somebody isn't, to all intents and purposes, buying the contract? Because what we don't want them is to come back and say, well, actually, and forgive me, to help Mrs. Miggins at home, we said it cost £15 for this. It's actually 25. How do we know that £15 figure they give us is accurate?
So the schedule of rates will link to the additional volume payment mechanism, should that ever be required, and we'll be looking to make sure that is no more than the notional volume delivery cost from the service users that can be delivered within the core service block payment element. The competitive tension through the tender process will also help us to ensure there will be weighting allocated to those costs to ensure that providers are incentivised to make sure they are being as competitive as possible when determining that pricing.
Can I come back on that? Just my slight concern is that how we sense checking that. There will be services that will be additional to the block, which I get, that will have a cost to them. Once we've signed up a contract with these people, that, you know, and they say, well, actually, we thought we could do it for this amount, but it's going to. How do we know that those figures they're giving us are realistic, and they're not just saying, oh yeah, I can do it for £5?
So there is benchmarking activity that's happened through the review cycle and will continue fundamentally for elements of the service that are available in the wider market, things like the telecare response service element, to give us an assurance that actually the services, the costed services that are being delivered through the new wellbeing service will be delivered in a competitive rate.
So, I mean, the CSC people will be our employees, will they, or Serco employees? Because, or will, I mean, the people doing the triaging at the CSC, who are they? Will they be Serco on our behalf?
Serco on our behalf, yes.
So that will mean that should manage the demand, and as long as there's only one, having one front door, that should help with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Davis anticipated my question with his first question. When you say that our teams don't go into hospitals, or won't be going into hospitals because it's a crowded market, and you explained to Councillor Davis your answer, but I'm still quite concerned about this. So how do we know that the people who are out there are delivering best practice, offering best value for money? They're not going for the quick wins, the low-hanging fruit, as you described. And how do we know that our service isn't then picking up cases which are complicated and which have deteriorated? And is this an opportunity for scrutiny to look at this? Thank you.
From the review findings, I'm not particularly concerned that we are picking up complex people because other people are picking up simpler people's needs, and the services that are in the hospital space. I think picking up one of Martin's points, that they are broadly commissioned by the public sector in some form or another to be in those settings. So they are managed. They are managed in a contract management sense by other public sector organisations. The council will still have a really big presence in hospitals because obviously we have social care teams, discharge planning workers. We'll still be in the setting. We just won't be putting the wellbeing service in the setting because the particular niche that we put them in for, which was around doing some of the wraparound that enables the discharge, which isn't necessarily the clinical, and they don't have care needs in the regulated sense of the term care needs. The wellbeing service would fill that gap. What we find actually is we have largely NHS commissioned services from largely third sector organisations that are now filling that space really adequately. And so we don't need to be in that space. We don't need to be in that space anymore because we're just complicating the picture for discharge planners. Does that? So we haven't got maverick organisations kind of pottering about in hospitals. They are commissioned and managed and contract managed in what they're doing, not by us largely, but they are.
Thanks, Leader. Just a very quick question. Obviously, this process has been underway for some time in terms of this paper. In terms of the budget announcements recently, the new statutory minimum wage of £11.50, how have you impacted that into your thinking? Because quite clearly, a lot of money goes on people, and many of whom receive that money at that level in terms of delivering care and support. So What impact will the budget announcement have on our thinking financially?
Yes, thank you. We have factored all of those things, both retrospective pressures that have been absorbed already in the service, prospective pressures that we know are coming down the system, and and therefore put in a range of things to try and hold the budget demand equation at the budget that we have available to us to manage that. In some ways, the final testing of some of that will be through the tender process, where we will see the solutions that providers are saying they can offer and the volumes they can offer them at for the fixed budget. But we have looked at the things that were taken out of the service model currently, at the pressures that they've absorbed so far in the current provider model, the forecast growth, and so on and so forth. So we've done, basically it's quite a complicated in and out picture, which arrives us at a £3.3 million fixed budget for a volume that we understand that incorporates all of the pressures that we know about.
Any further contributions? So I'll let the Chief here, because obviously we've got some recommendations here. I think it's just a question of there are some issues to thrash out and how best to deal with that in a sensible way. Cara, just to remind us, when is the contract got to go out? What's the timescale we're looking at?
Publication of the tender will be mid-January.
That's the latest we can
Yes,
go.
it is. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Leader. I mean, I think there's been some excellent comments and debate this morning. Clearly, one of the recommendations is that the final form of the tender, before it goes out, is delegated to the Executive Director of Adult Care and Community Wellbeing, in consultation with the Executive Counsellor for Adult Care and Public Health as well. And so what I'm proposing is that we take your comments. We clearly need to do some further work to strengthen the paper, strengthen the information and the numerics that are within the paper in order for an informed decision to be made. So with the agreement of the committee, I suggest that we need to review the paper and then review the decision-making processes before that is then delegated as outlined in the paper.
Are we agreeing? I mean, obviously, looking at the recommendations, one is approves the commissioning. I presume we're all very happy with that. And then approves the procurement process. I think it's the detail. So are you suggesting then that we delegate it today and then we'll use informal processes to make sure that that the executive will be reassured that the process is robust?
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting, Leader. That would be agreeable, that we approve it subject to the delegation and that we use the informal decision-making processes to provide that assurance following on through the strengthening of the paper as well.
With that suggestion, so we basically agree the recommendations with, but the sort of issues which are still outstanding are noted. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Have you got yes, so the next item is revenue budget for this financial year, I believe, quarter two. So, Andrew and Michelle, thank you.
I'll just bring a brief introduction, Leader, before handing over to Michelle. So I think we're presenting a paper that's slightly different to one that might be being presented in many other councils across the country today, with an underspend position. Michelle will talk about the reasons for that briefly in a second. Now, I think it's fair to say some of those are fortuitous and some of those are structural in a sense, particularly around our funding. And I think I just wanted to provide the committee with some reassurance that the budget process that we're currently going through at the moment will be feeding those into that process, and we're back next month at the start of January. I think it's the 9th, to bring that first budget proposal back to executive. Just also wanted to reflect on the national position as well. I think Councillor Davey asked a very good question about the national living wage. We're currently working through the implications of that increase, which was beyond that which was forecast. It will have an impact on our care budgets, and things like our home to school transport budget as well. So we're currently working through the implications of that for that January report. Also as well, we're expecting a policy paper announcement today from DLUC. We just heard about that late last night, which might set out some of the parameters of the settlement that will be coming later on in the month, but we're expecting that to be really, really late, right before Christmas again as last year. So that's just a bit of context. I'll hand over to Michelle for some of the detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the report summarises our current forecasts against the revenue budget that we've approved for the current financial year, and there's more detail of the financial position and the use of our reserves and the development fund initiative. Not sitting close enough. Is that better? Thank you. So the report appendices start at page 67, and on that page there is a table that sets out the overall position, and I'll just cover some of those. So we're forecasting an overall underspend of 18.4 million, with 11.6 million of that relating to the service budgets. 3.6 million relates to other budgets, which includes our insurance and contingency budgets, and 3.2 million of that relates to additional funding, which is primarily relating to business rates pooling. The overall underspend mainly reflects some one-off exceptional items, and in the service budgets, this includes additional income from our energy from waste plant and from the electricity sales that are generated from the plant, and that amounts to around 6 million. Additional traffic regulation order income, and that's primarily around the fines that we impose on utility companies for accessing the highways, and lower than expected energy costs. So we made quite a prudent provision in the budget for the increasing electricity prices that we were seeing at the time we set the budget, and the costs of coming underneath what we provided for. So this position provides an opportunity to proactively make some capital investments specific to the services where those underspends are relevant, and the investment is absolutely required. The report proposes using service underspends to meet some of the needs of the capital projects relating to these services, namely investment in waste transfer stations for requirements under the Environment Act, investment in Cross Keys Bridge, electrification of the bridge, and furthering continuing the LED swap out for the street lighting in Lincolnshire. Just to note, this proposal is to make budget provision for these items, and those schemes will go through our normal decision making as the normal process for spends of key decision levels. If these proposals are accepted, these movements will have a remaining underspend of 9.6 million in our revenue budget, which is about 1.6% of our net budget. Just to point out as well, whilst the report states a continuing strong financial resilience of the council, and as Andrew set out, an underspend position is quite unusual for councils at this time, it's worth noting we're still reporting pressures in the information in the appendices around services. These include increased demand in areas like education, healthcare plans, cost of social care placements, particularly out of county for children, adult social care provision and provision of school transport, which are currently being offset by underspends, use of contingency and reserves. So happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. There are some scrutiny comments. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Leader. So on the 30th of November, the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board considered this report and unanimously supported the recommendation to the Executive. During the debate, board members raised concerns about the risks associated with using interim beds for adult social care and community wellbeing, highlighting financial implications and potential drawbacks for patients. The Chief Executive addressed the complexity of the situation, explaining the efforts to streamline the procurement of transitional care beds and create a comprehensive intermediate care layer. The aim was to have a unified approach to support discharge from hospitals and promote independence for individuals requiring short-term beds. The challenges in finalising the intermediate care layers design by April were acknowledged, citing a delay of 6 to 9 months. Officers gave assurance regarding the overspends in transport, that the budget had a £9 million contingency, which they anticipated using partially, but not entirely. Ongoing reviews by the team aimed to ensure that the contingency covered the necessary expenses, with plans to incorporate findings into the future budgets for sustained financial stability. Members commended the clarity and accessibility of the financial paper, expressing appreciation for the transparent explanation of an underspend. The paper's ability to make financial information easily understandable for the public was highlighted. There was a query raised about the anticipated increase in revenue from additional traffic regulation orders, and the response clarified that the expected rise in income from TROs was attributed to the fines imposed on utility companies for road-related violations. While fines were initially designed as a deterrent, the reality demonstrated a revenue-generating aspect, indicating a need for ongoing scrutiny and potential adjustments in the fine system to align with its intended purpose. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Right, we'll deal with those three before we go to general debate. First one relates to adult care and sustainability of interim beds. So I don't know whether Martin or Debbie wants to deal with that.
I'm happy to come in if Martin may want to carry on. So we've been working with our health colleagues to look at an intermediate care layer. So this is a layer to try and support discharge from hospital and prevent hospital admissions. It's a really busy, complex, confused picture at the moment, and I think this links into what Martin was saying earlier in terms of lots of innovation, but a very sort of confused picture. And so whilst we commission transitional care beds, we also commission active recovery beds, which are paid on a slightly different payment mechanism and have a different offer. The Community Trust also commission transitional care beds to, again, a very different specification. And then we also have our community hospitals as well. The Hospital Trust also commission transitional care arrangements. We want to move to a position where we have an integrated approach to and a very clear discharge pathway, so that the intermediate care layer is less busy, less confused, and offers much clearer pathways for people needing discharge. We had hoped that those arrangements would be clearer in order to be able to go out to procurement, to be able to start in April 2024. Unfortunately, because of the complexity, because of some of the challenges with really trying to identify demand, we've struggled to meet that deadline, but we are anticipating being able to procure a joint approach and a joint pathway for intermediate care with our health colleagues by April 2025.
Thank you for that one. Then two others are transport, Andy. One is the overspend on, I presume it's home to school transport, and making profit on your fines. So can you just address those two, please?
Yeah, as you're aware, Councillor Hill, we entered into a protocol earlier in the year with some of the utility companies to try and demonstrate the commitment to actually try and stop the inappropriate and unregulated behaviour. In spite of those sort of commitments, we still continue to generate the sort of fines because they do overrun. One might hope that the continued use of that protocol and the deterrent of the fines might change the behaviours. The industry and the sector perhaps aren't responding as positively as we might have thought. If they do eventually, then obviously that income level would drop away. Obviously the underlying issue is they do pay for the permits, as do any other road users who need access to our roads. So there's a permit system which actually generates an income level, which is a base level of income, and the provisions in the legislation is that money should be reinvested into actually ongoing improvements into the service.
So we're content then that you're content that the level of enforcement, indeed in terms of financial input that we're putting into it, is there's no unmet demand then in terms of enforcement?
I presume, given the level of income that we're generating, if we actually went out and did more checks, I dare say we might generate some further income levels. We are, as I say, working behind the scenes to sort of improve their practices and their performances, and that protocol that we entered into was a commitment that the sector gave to us. Again, we rely on our inspectors that are out and about to pick up on unauthorised activity. We also get all the reports that come through. We could do further spot checks if you felt that was appropriate to review the situation.
I mean, obviously, it's difficult. You can't just take 1 year on its own, but
No.
if there was a persistent more income coming in than anticipated through fines, obviously the decision may be made. But I'm just trying to check whether that's an option, but I'm just not suggesting it. But I'm just asking, are we happy? Is everybody happy that all the enforcement is happening that could be happening?
I think we would get anecdotal information and evidence coming through other sources if we felt the problem was even greater than the fines we were generating from our inspection regimes. I mean,
no communities out there saying, well, why don't you enforce it a bit more because I'm fed up with people parking illegally?
don't think we're getting inundated with complaints
Okay,
of that
but anyway,
nature.
I'm just making
and
a point. I won't
the local highway managers are in regular dialogue and discussion with the local councillors. If there was more information, we would target where that information was coming from.
Carry on. Sorry, Councillor Betroyd, just on that point. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just on the point of illegal parking, really. I don't know when anyone else saw Look North last night, but it had Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue there, trying to get through certain streets and not being able to. So I don't know whether that feeds into any of that as well.
Davies, do you want to come in?
Yeah, this isn't illegal parking, this is permits. This isn't parking. This is permits to work on the road. The only thing I would say, when we set the scheme up, we talked to Norfolk, who'd got one already, is where there is a ceiling of what we can find. And I do think that some of the utilities have almost written it in as a cost of doing business. Personally, I think if the fines were much higher, we might get more of a reaction from them in terms of, and I barely mentioned the words A15 and traffic lights left out too long. But that is a classic case and a classic example. I think if you lifted them higher, you wouldn't get that happening. Of course, you could make the counter argument that by fining utility companies, in essence, what you're doing is, because they'll just pass the costs on to their customers, you're making customers pay more for water, electric, etc.
And in terms of the home to school transport, as you're aware, Councillor Hill, there's been a recent report issued through the CCN which highlights some of the ongoing challenges and issues that exist for all authorities that deal with home to school transport. All of those issues are matters that are identified within the transformation programme activity that we're working through. The impact on the on-year budgets is continued to be monitored closely. The impact of the living wage increases are undoubtedly going to have a greater impact than had been previously budgeted for, and further forecasts are being refined at this moment in time. We still believe we'll be within the contingency level that was actually allowed for. We're probably likely to be closer to the limit of that than was originally expected.
There was the CCN report, but I don't think really there was any practical suggestions they came up with, apart from, I don't think there's anything really came out which is going to solve the problem, apart from more money from government.
No, they were confirming and evidencing the issues that we are fundamentally aware of and have been dealing with and trying to address. Yeah.
Right, well, yes, Councillor Woolley.
If I may go back to your previous point, I'm sorry, I was waving my arm, I just wanted to reflect on the TROs and the permits. I can only speak anecdotally, but my own residents are really quite pleased there is a mechanism to try and speed up when roadworks are overrunning, that if there's a process in place where they can actually see that fines are being made and paid, it does sweeten the pill a little bit. So obviously we would like the roadworks to be completed in a timely manner, but to have this opportunity to be able to chivvy them along does at least sit well with residents. Thank you.
I think, as we've known, practice is improving on the TRO, isn't it, with utilities? It's not where we want it yet, but it's a lot better than it was. Okay, general comments, please, on the budget which has been presented. Anybody? Did you want to say something about flooding, Councillor Davey?
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. I think that we're all aware of the recent impacts of Storm Babette and the cost, I'm sure, of the clear-up and the pressure it's caused across our service areas. I think that, bearing in mind we have an underspend here and there's still uncommitted money, I think it would be advisable that we consider how we go forward in terms of spending money. So obviously the finance is handled by yourself, Councillor Hill, but I would recommend that we would be looking to put some additional money into flooding and flood works in the future. And I think that would be a very welcome thing for all the people of Lincolnshire who have been impacted over the last few weeks. And it's quite clear that if we take the climate change scenarios as read, that we are not going to be able to duck these bullets that come along quite regularly now. I think all of us know that about every 4 years we have a major incident. Storm Babette was this year's. I suspect that they're going to increase in frequency in the years ahead, and we need to be prepared for that. So anything we can do to help the residents of Lincolnshire help themselves and deal with some of the backlog of works that might ease that, and I'm sure Councillor Davies will agree with me on the highway side of things. We are getting a lot of surface water flooding now, and it is impacting, and we saw that only yesterday with the snow melt on the western side of the county. So I think as we would be wise as an executive board to consider what we can put into that series of works going forward. And you know, we do have some money available, I think, because of the circumstances we find ourselves in. And I have to say the budget position generally represents a well-managed council, well-managed finances, and knowing that there are a dozen and plus other authorities that are likely to go the way of Nottingham in the next few months, then, you know, I think there's credit to the management team here in terms of managing finance. And I think there are things the public would expect us to do if we have resource available to do it, Leader.
Thank you for that, and I would agree. I mean, obviously, certainly the flood committee were very, you know, keen, because obviously, as we're all aware, as lead flood authority, you know, we have a responsibility. I mean, I think people sometimes don't realise, it doesn't mean we have to do all this stuff ourselves, but sometimes when there's multiple ownership of ditches and drains and pipes, it's, in the end, the only practical solution is for us to do stuff which legally we're not have to do. It's not a statutory responsibility, but I think we all know from all the issues we've had, all the many flooding issues we've had, it would only be, I think I would agree with you, it would only be sensible to, as we've got some capacity, to actually put more money in. I mean, I did say it's not just the ones, the councils which are going bankrupt. We are quite, not unique, we're one of a very few band of councillors who are not dealing with overspends within years. So I think it is a credit, but I think to be fair, you know, it's probably a little bit more, you know, probably we need to be a bit more accurate with our electricity. I know we were, can you just explain how you came up to the electricity, how in terms of when we were setting the budget, we set the electricity, and obviously there was an additional money coming off the energy from waste plant, which you could argue should have been predicted a bit clearer.
Yeah, so yeah, there's two bits related to energy. So we're in a contractual arrangement with the Eastern Shire's purchasing organisation around our energy purchases, and I guess it's a bit like I think it's Cambridge Analytica who predict the hump that you get in terms of the price cap that you pay on your domestic energy. So when we were going through that contractual process last summer, the rump was expected to be longer and more pronounced than it ended up being. So we've ended up coming out of that block purchase of energy at a lower rate than the one that we went in on, basically. So hence this shorter position. I think it's fair to say, yeah, we have been prudent in terms of doing that. Obviously, I wouldn't ever want to put a budget in front of you where you'd be facing overspends in year. So, but I do hold my hands up to that. It was a prudent basis that we did it on. The other one's slightly different. It's with the energy from waste. I guess it proves the point that if you're selling energy, you're in the right business at the moment, because that's we've benefited from that onward sale of the excess energy that's produced there. But as I said at the start in my introduction, we are going through that process at the moment in terms of the proposals for next year's budget, ensuring that they're as accurate and as within the window of reasonableness that they can be, I think.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to agree with Councillor Davies' suggestion. I think it's the fit and proper thing to do to use the overspend to benefit our communities. The ones particularly that were affected by Storm Babette, it's going to keep happening, and I think that's exactly the right place to put some of that underspend. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Davey, we currently have put additional money in, haven't we, which will run out in next year, won't it?
That's correct, Leader. So, you know, I would suggest looking at the underspend numbers, and that if there was availability of, say, £4 million to support flood works across Lincolnshire, then I think that would be a very welcome basis on which to proceed. And it still leaves, I think, Andrew, capacity within the system for any shocks that might come along, whether it's through increased energy costs or whatever coming down the track. We do live in an unstable world, so we shouldn't spend all of it, in my view, but we could make an allowance, I think, of, say, 4 million, if that was agreeable with yourself, Councillor Hill, and the rest of the executive.
Well, I think we can afford it, Andrew, can't we? I think we're pretty sure.
Yeah, just confirm. I think based on the position that we've got, it's
I think
reasonable
we'll
and
manage, yeah. Okay, so a suggestion there of 4 million. Would that find approval with the committee?
Agreed.
Okay, any further comments, questions? It is obviously a Q2 report, so a while, half the year to go yet, and we don't know. Yes, Councillor Petroid.
Thank you. It's just around the electricity and the ESPO contract. I just wondered, how long is the new contract signed for? Is it 5 years or is it more? Because that would give us stability over that time, won't it, for budget setting?
that is a good question, and I don't know the term off the top of my head, but I can come back to you, Councillor Boothroyd, with some more certainty on that.
Yeah, I can't remember. Anyway, okay, so any further comments, questions, please? Okay then, so we've got some recommendations which we need to add a further recommendation then. So, and I presume a recommendation 2 will stay the same? Because it currently says 8 million into, just so we're clear on that, Andrew.
Yeah, so recommendation 2 is the movement of to the 3 capital schemes. The reason why we've done an extra, a third one, is that it could be used for revenue or capital, essentially. I think that's the reason, just to get the definition right.
Thank you for that. So recommendations 1 and 2 stay the same. Recommendation 3 is I would like to move the amendment that we approve a further allocation of £4 million from the revenue budget underspend to be used for flood investigations and alleviation, and we approve such revenue to revenue or revenue to capital budget transfers requiring executive approval as shall be necessary to give effect to such allocation. In English, that means, yeah, we can do what we like with it. I recognise David Coleman's hand in that recommendation. Okay, so there's 3 recommendations there. All those in favour, please show. There's nobody against, so that's agreed. Thank you. And I think communities will welcome that extra support, because clearly I think most of us have got communities who are having issues with excess water. Okay, we then move on to capital then. You two?
Thank you.
Straight to Michelle, is it?
Yeah, yes, thank you. So the report provides an update of our capital investment compared to our planned programme for 23-24 and reflects the changes that we've made during the phasing and the delivery of the programme. The programme is currently forecasting to underspend 21 million against a net programme of 146 million, and the underspend is predominantly relating to the corporate capital contingency, which we hold to address pressures within the programme during the year and to support opportunities to invest that haven't previously been included in the programme. So the report includes details around the delivery of the programme, and the table in A4 in the appendices, and the narrative gives an update on key programmes in each service area. The end of the report also includes the additions that we've just proposed in the revenue report to include into the programme, and just to assure executive that we continue to review the overall programme to ensure that we're maximising our investment opportunities, as we've just discussed, whilst ensuring that we are within our kind of long-term affordable envelope, and we'll consider this again as part of budget setting process that we're currently going through.
Comments from scrutiny?
Thank you, Leader. So on the...
Andrew's got 80 million. I'm surprised you're still here, Andrew.
No, well, it's, actually, that's even a typo in that. I've just spotted that. So, so the board considered this report last Thursday and unanimously supported the recommendations to the executive. Members thanked the officers for a detailed report. A request was made regarding clarity on page 308, which is on page 88 of this executive report, where it appeared that 18.2 million was allocated to the Chief Finance Officer. It was clarified that the mentioned amount was associated with the corporate contingency and not designated for a specific service area. The request was made for future presentations to enhance clarity in the title or narrative to avoid potential misinterpretations. ensuring a more accurate understanding of the financial allocations. Officers acknowledged the feedback and committed to updating the narrative for improved transparency. Thank you, Leader.
You're 80 million then, Andrew. I just want to clarify that. He looks very happy today. I can't imagine why.
Thank you, Leader. No, it's just, as Councillor Stokes said, that's the budget, the name of the budget line where we keep the capital contingency that Michelle just referred to there. And as she said in her presentation, you know, exploring ways of redeploying that as part of the next budget process that you'll be discussing next month. It isn't a back pocket or anything else that the Treasurer might.
No, it just needs a clarification.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that was a valid point made.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're committed to doing that.
So we know, you know, it's clear what the money's for. Very good. Any further comments on this? So it is, again, half-yearly report. No comments. Okay, is that agreed then? Thank you very much. So those two recommendations which we agreed, there's no corrective action apart from the issue about clarification on that figure. Okay then, so then we move on to item 8, which is Corporate Plan Success Framework, Quarter 2. Caroline, thank you.
Thank you. So yes, in terms of the report for today, it's as at the end of September. We've got 40 activities that we can report in Quarter 2. So those are the pieces of work, the elements that underpin the corporate plan priorities. Only 2 of these activities are amber rated, all the others are green, which means they're on plan. The 2 that are amber rated, one relates to the sustainable financial and operating model for the public protection function. And the reason for this is there is still some outstanding work in relation to the recruitment of appropriate staff into the function and the development of performance and commissioning frameworks. The second activity relates to the implementation of Housing for Independence strategy and specifically the listing building consent required for the Grange Farm scheme. Due to the complexities and risks of the site, the listing building consent hasn't been submitted this quarter, but is anticipated to be submitted in Quarter 4. In terms of key performance indicators in Quarter 2, so there are 27 that are reported for Quarter 2, and of these 93% are either exceeding or achieving their target. Of the 6 KPIs that are exceeding their target, 3 were reported as exceeding in Quarter 1 as well, so we're familiar with these. They relate to household waste to landfill, customer levels of satisfaction and super fast broadband. Of the other 3 measures that are exceeding their targets, 2 of those relate to adult learning. So that's people accessing learning and skills, along with the number of qualifications that have been delivered. We continue to focus on widening the participation. I know this is a point that will be of OSMB feedback to ensure that those qualifications that are being delivered and the skills being achieved do give employability skills to those that are accessing them. The final measure that's exceeding its target relates to carers who've received a review of their needs. This has gone from not achieving its target in Quarter 1 to exceeding in Quarter 2. What we've done is we've actually reviewed the definition of the measure to ensure that we're pulling the correct cohort of individuals into the reporting. This does now accurately reflect the performance capability of the service, and we are accounting for all of our carers correctly in terms of whether they've had a review of their needs. There's really strong performance with 96% of carers have had a review of their needs. So really good to know that we are out and understanding the needs of that group. In terms of those measures that are achieving their target or the ambition that has been set, there are 19 measures in Quarter 2, so a really positive picture that we are achieving those targets. Only 4 of these are newly reported as achieving in Quarter 2. The first one relates to the percentage of children with education, health and care plans in a mainstream setting. And then the other 2 measures relate to the percentage of children eligible 2-year-olds who are in receipt of their early years entitlement, and the percentage of 3- and 4-year-olds who are also taking up their universal entitlement. So a really positive picture that our very young children are accessing their entitlement in terms of education. The measure relating to children in care living in a family environment was amended as per the OSMB suggestion and recommendation in August. So we have removed the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children from the measure. This means that the target of 82% has been set, and it shows that we are now achieving that performance target that has been set. The measures relating to recycling at household waste recycling centres is also achieving its target. We have always, as always, included a summary around waste, including the national context in this report. The two measures that are not achieving their target in Q2, one relates to national recycling rate and again is covered by the summary in the document, and the second measure relates to adult carers supported in the last 12 months. We didn't achieve the target in Q1 and we still aren't achieving the target in Q2. It does state in the report that there's a proposal that we may change the target in year for this measure, but a further discussion at Adult Care and Community Wellbeing Directorate Leadership Team is that actually we will continue with this target for the remainder of 23-24, and that we will review all of the indicators reported into executive around carers and ensure that appropriate measures and targets are set for 24-25. In terms of contextual measures, so those that the Executive Director makes a decision on how to rate them, they are all RAG rated green within this report, with the exception of one, which relates to flooding incidents investigated. It was felt appropriate to include this in the report given the events of recent weeks. We currently have 53 ongoing Section 19 investigation, however, as reported in this report. However, as a result of Storm Babette, there are now 173 new Section 19 reports of varying complexities, which will be required to understand the causality of the flooding at various locations, often affecting multiple households. This information it was reported to Environment and Economy Scrutiny last week on the 28th of November and was discussed extensively. So overall, the report shows a strong position in Q2 in relation to achieving the vast majority of the targets that we've set for this year and for the effective delivery of the majority of the activities that support the delivery of our corporate plan priorities. I'll now hand over for any questions.
Thank you for that. Yes, I mean, obviously the 4 million we've just allocated will help with the Section 119, is it? I can't remember what it... Section 19. Yeah, good. That's good. Questions, comments, please, committee. There was there was on the chart where it's talking about the household waste collected. We're in target, but can you just explain? I've just lost it again. Why the target suddenly dips on that page? I can't remember which page it was. It was where the waste bit is. Yes, household waste performance indicator 36 on page 136. I do know I have been told the answer to that, but I can't, because the target's changed quite dramatically.
Yeah, I'm just...
Perhaps Andy can help us, as she's there. Mm. 136 page.
Yeah, is it PI 36, the household waste collected, or... Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just check.
So the indicator, the way it's collected, has been changed, and also in the context of the way the waste is collected by the collection authorities. Obviously, we've made changes in terms of the collection regime. So we've got the different recycling. The paper and card is now collected separately, so it's again affecting how the actual direct household waste is recorded.
If you look at it, you know, on quarter 4 of 22-23, the target was 1,000 kilos per household. Then it drops down in Q1 for this year to 280 kilos. I mean, I know we're rolling out paper and card, but there must be a reason why that has changed so dramatically.
I think what I'll do is I'll have a look into that and provide some further narrative. Whether it's actually been an error on the graph, I'm not sure, but I will certainly come back and clarify that.
Councillor McNally, I'll leave it in your capable hands.
Hang on, I've got one.
Thank you, Leader. I'll be honest, I don't know. I can't see why it'd be that low.
Yeah. Apologies. Yeah. I now have the answer. So it's actually a cumulative performance indicator. So the other targets you'll see are the end of the period, so sorry, quarter 4 for the end of each of the years. So we are working towards the 1,000 kilograms by quarter 4. Obviously, we're only halfway there with 560 because we're only halfway through the year.
So it has changed from because if you look at the previous year, it was a flat 1,000 kilos.
No, that's the end of the year position. So yeah, we achieved at the end of each of the previous years.
Oh, I see. They're all quarter
Yeah, they're all
fours.
quarter 4
Thank you.
positions. So apologies.
That's great.
Thank
So
you.
the target actually hasn't changed. It's
No.
on its way.
Yeah.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Councillor Bertroyd.
Could we ask for that to be put on there? Because anyone look like we've just done, anyone looking at that would think it's massively dropped rather than we're starting again to measure.
I agree. I mean, it's, once you realise, it's pretty obvious, but yeah, I think there needs to be little notes.
Yeah.
Just to remind you. Further comments, question, please. Councillor Woolley.
Thank you, Leader. In the next paper for the public health report, there's reference to over or around about 20,000 unpaid carers over the age of 65. On page 133, one of the indicators, and one of those that we're not hitting the target on, is that there's been 11,000 odd in this particular last 12 months. Of those, 9,000 were over 65. So in other words, it's around about 46% of those that could be supported. We've only hit 46%. And I'm just wondering whether we could have an assurance that we're doing all we can do to get to that other lump. Thank you.
The Director's going to help with you.
I think I draw a sharp distinction between people who are carers and carers who need support. So a very large proportion of carers, fortunately, don't need any kind of support from the council. We reach out to those we try to reach out to all carers to see whether they need support and then support those who need it. And I'm sure there's more we can do to reach out to them, but I think I would caution against putting the two figures together.
Yes, that's absolutely fine.
I think that's very sensible advice, and there are a lot of people who just get on with it, don't they? And they do not only their families or their relatives a big service, also the council as well. And, inevitably it's an assessment, I presume, because we don't know for sure people. Any further comments? Sorry, the microphone was off. So the recommendation is that the Porter 2 performance be considered and noted. Agreed? Thank you. Right then. So then, you've had a preview from Councillor. Oh, no. Yeah, it's the Director of Public Health report, as Councillor Woolley has introduced for you, Derek. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Woolley. As Executive will be aware, Director of Public Health's annual report is statutory responsibility. Directors of Public Health have to write one, and the Council has to publish one. And this year we focused, along with Martin's predecessor, Glenn, a focus on older adults across Lincolnshire. So we're really bringing it here just for final approval so that we can publish. There are a few little tweaks we're still making just to finalise a couple of the numbers and the graphs, but it's pretty well there. I'll just pull out the headlines rather than go through the detail if that's okay, Leader, and then happy to answer any questions. As I said, the report is a joint report between myself and Glenn, and it focuses on older adults. Clearly an issue in Lincolnshire, and we describe in the report the particular demography that we've got, the profile, and the fact that we've got a higher proportion of our population are older adults, as described on page 6 of the report, 172 in your packs. You can see there that about nearly a quarter of the population in Lincolnshire is aged 65 or above, as compared to only 18%, so less than 1 in 5 in England and 1 in 5 in the East Midlands. And that clearly has an impact on the health and care services across the county. You then layer that on top of the fact that we are a large rural, coastal area, with population dispersed right the way across the county. All of that is important in terms of the current service provision that we provide, the future way that we help our older population and our working age population to age healthily, and that's what the report describes in a lot more detail. In terms of framing it, we've used the Centre for Ageing Better World Health Organization Age Friendly Cities framework, and Executive will be aware that we are the national coastal rural partner for the Centre for Ageing Better, in terms of looking at how we create the environment within which our population can age well and therefore obviously live long and fulfilling lives. And then you'll see on the in the diagram on page 5 of the report, page 171, it looks like a flower, and each of those petals of the flower are domains that we've looked at within the report. We've just excuse me, we've described what we already do in terms of helping our population age well against each of those areas, and we also describe some of the key actions that need to be carried out to make sure that we continue to provide the best environment possible for our population to age well. I'm not proposing to go through those in detail, but happy to pick up any questions as we go. Some of the key findings overlap with each other, so you'll see that things like transport, obviously in a place like Lincolnshire, is a key enabler and will help people to stay connected and to access services. But also digital inclusion is a key area as health and care services develop. The overarching plan will be to try to make sure that we have a blended solution. So people who need to go into a place to receive the right care and support should be able to get into that place, but equally we should be bringing services out of, for example, our acute hospital sites wherever possible, so we can deliver those services to people in their own communities. And there's a whole range of different ways we can do that, and technology and digital inclusion are going to be key to that. Another key area that we pull out is social participation and making sure that people connect and stay connected with their communities. One of the key things that we talk about in public health is people need a home, a job and a friend, and obviously as you age, the language might change a little bit, but the nature of having social connectedness, having a reason to engage, which might be social participation, it might be civic engagement, is really, really important. And obviously the quality of our housing stock is fundamental to this. So they're the headlines really from the report. As I said, I won't go into any more details. As ever with the Director of Public Health Annual Report, we've picked out some of the key salient points as we go. We've flagged up some of the services that we already provide across the county, either from a county council or in partnership with our NHS or district colleagues. And then in the conclusions, we pick up the sort of the what next bit. Those petals on the flower are very much connected to the main flower, and there's a lot of interconnectedness between each of those areas, and we describe that in figure 2 on page 196 in the pack, that you can't look at one in splendid isolation. We need to look at some of the structural challenges that underlie some of those. I've talked about the fact that social isolation is a real challenge, and we need to make sure that we do everything we can to make sure our communities stay connected with each other. Transport and digital inclusion are key to that, and as I said, housing is fundamental to all of this work, and we have mechanisms that executive are already aware of to tackle all of those areas at a county level. That's all I was going to say. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Derek. Obviously, quite sobering assessment of what's coming in terms of demand and challenges, and just welcome the recommendations you've made at the end. So questions, comments, please. Councillor Bowkett.
Just a comment, really, it's an excellent report as usual, but I like the title, Adding Life to Years, and obviously being over 60, that gives me hope that there is life after 60. So, but no, it's a really good report. Obviously the digital exclusion is obviously quite worrying to me because I live on the coast. and the green and yellow is all down that side. So, but we are looking at that and working on that. So, but no, as usual, an excellent report. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely excellent report. But it sort of begs the question to you, Derek. You know, we've got a growing elderly population. Ageing is something that's going on now. We're going to have more challenges in the future. So it sort of begs the question is, whilst it's this year's theme of your report, do you want to, would it not be sensible to revisit this on every 3 to 5 years, just to see whether we're still meeting the challenges that you picked up in the original report?
Yeah, I think that's a really sensible suggestion, Councillor Davey. I think we need to keep checking that we are adapting our systems given the demography. I'm very happy to, what we could do an annex every couple of years just to say, as we've progressed, and we do, as you know, come to executive and other fora with how we've moved on previous Director of Public Health annual reports, so that makes a lot of sense. Just to pick up on Councillor Bokett's point about adding life to years, I didn't mention that and I should have done, so apologies. It's really important. One of the reasons we've got an ageing population is we've been very good at keeping people alive longer, which is obviously a great thing to do. We need to focus as well on quality of life. So it's not just adding years to life, it's about adding life to those years that we get. And also recognising that a lot of people, as they get older, want to maintain engagement, whether it's they want to stay in the labour market, and we've got to make sure that we provide that opportunity. There's clear work that we want to do, and we're going to be hopefully trying to get some national funding in around getting people who are outside the labour market for fairly low-level physical, you know, musculoskeletal problems, bad backs, bad necks, or low-level mental health problems, back into the labour market down the coast, because we have key challenges there about getting people into the market, and the government are opening up some funding streams there that we can bid to. So absolutely, we've got some very specific actions we want to pick up.
Thank you. I mean, in terms of, take the transportation, for example, it says promote, support the expansion of voluntary car schemes, improve access for our most isolated communities. But I think you could argue generally, and back with the flooding, I think there's an element of self-help and an element of local communities supporting people informally. So I just wonder, I know with the car schemes 10 years ago, we had a big promotion on that, didn't we, to help, for example, parish councils to know what's out there and encourage them to get a sort of network of voluntary car drivers, so you didn't have to catch a bus to have a convoluted trip to the doctor. There was somebody who was organised. I just wonder, in terms of is it time to promote that again, but also promote self-help and actually using the parish councils and other community groups to actually step into that space, not expect them to do it all, but expect them to identify and support. So I just wonder, is there something there in that we could consider?
Absolutely, really happy to work on that. We'll all remember that during COVID, communities came forward, supported each other, and they still do, absolutely, but there is opportunity there, I think. One of the infrastructure challenges we've got is a large rural coastal community like Lincolnshire. We have a huge range of different, very, very local community and voluntary organisations that could probably step into this, and some of the work that we're doing at a sort of Lincolnshire level with our NHS and other colleagues is how we engage with all of those different very local agencies, so we could absolutely feed that in and make sure we do that, yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. I think the only point I would make there on what Derek said is there's an awful lot of stuff that's already out there, but we're not very good at collating it. And so, for example, there are NHS responders who do exactly what you've said about taking people to their hospital appointments, going and picking prescriptions up. But I wouldn't like to number, looking in this room, how many people are aware that that service is available from those volunteers that might be embedded in the community. So I think there is a piece of work that we do just need to do in finding a way of bringing it all together.
There's a sort of a communication issue, but also a coordination and encouragement. So it's something I think we should look at to actually, because that we can't do it all, and then people need to, you know, and obviously it's just need organising and probably encourage those local representatives to understand that they have a role to play too, to at least, you know, make, it happens a lot, but it probably doesn't happen everywhere, does it? Okay. Any further comment? Yes, Councillor Troy.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just looking at the access to healthcare heat map as such, and once you obviously go into the north of West Lindsey, I'm assuming it's poor access because a lot of people may be going into North and North East Lincolnshire as such. Do we have evidence of that, and will that be reported going forward as we potentially go to devolution and Greater Lincolnshire?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Boorod. We do have those data, and we're getting stronger data by connecting up a lot of the disparate data sets that sit around here. We do get a flow up into Scunthorpe, and obviously the acute service review that the Humber are going through at the moment is really relevant to some of this as well. So we're feeding into that. There's something about people going into an acute hospital, as most people will think about in a hospital. That's important, in making sure we've got those transport lines and we've got the right services in those acute settings. But we've also got to recognise that often people will go into those hospitals for things that they don't need to go into an acute hospital for. And that's part of the work that we are kicking off at a system level to try to look at what the care out of a hospital is for people, and also what care can we get out of the hospital that doesn't need to be in the hospital, so it's delivered closer to home. Some of that could be digital, some of that might be with diagnostic centres that are coming online, and that'll help, and some of it might be actually just bringing clinicians out of a hospital setting and delivering services more locally.
Sorry, just on that, when you put all the heat maps together, there's clearly areas sort of on the East Coast, Gainsborough, Lincoln City, that suffer poorly from all of these areas, and I just wonder, you know, how we address them areas, because Gainsborough is very close to my area, and it continually appears on there, and I just wonder how we set and look to moving this forward, really, with partners, I suppose, which is some of the things we've identified. There's going to be a lot of investment in around Gainsborough and over the border, and I just think how we tie into that as well.
You might remember from last year's report where we looked at Greater Lincolnshire that the connection between, well, you'll know this better than me, the connection between Gainsborough and Scunthorpe is really important with the heavy industry side, and that plays out again in this sort of heat map, including access to services. So you're right, you've got deprivation, you've got the underlying health problems in a community, which is particular in down the East Coast in Gainsborough and in central Lincolnshire and in central Lincoln and in parts of Boston, actually. And then you've got access to services. And it's those three things that either create the environment in which somebody is going to get the best outcome, or the environment in which people are going to get far from best outcome, a suboptimal outcome. And that's all part of the community and primary partnership work that we're just building on at a system level. And absolutely, it's going to be about redesigning those services. We also need to stop people getting sick in the first place, of course, and that's going to be a key element. We'll be talking this afternoon around the prevention and health inequalities responsibilities that the NHS now has and how they're going to discharge that. I don't know whether Councillor Woolley wants to mention anything on that one.
Fine. I mean, obviously, in terms of, we had that I thought, very useful meeting with the health and care sector in terms of a systemic approach to, do you want to explain to the committee what happened and how that would link into providing some solutions to the problems you've identified?
So if we start with the NHS side and then work our way backwards to people who hopefully won't need the NHS, in a nutshell, I think that the system is very, very fragmented. We understand why. There have been different pockets of funding in different areas for different reasons. And so we've got lots and lots of different systems. There's a recognition amongst NHS partners that we need to look again at how the system is configured, whether that's very acute services or whether that's in the community and primary care setting. In some places, GP-led systems are going to work because we can keep recruiting GPs and we'll be okay. But in other parts of the county, we just can't recruit general practitioners. So the argument that we'll just carry on with the existing system, I think, is recognise that that's just not going to happen. It can't happen. It won't work. So we need to redesign a model where we provide as much care when people need care and support outside of the hospital setting and only go into a hospital if and when they need to do so. And that covers diagnostics, it covers a whole range of different services like physiotherapy, and they're not necessarily all delivered by general practitioners because we know they haven't got the space. So that's that side of it. There's also a really big part about making sure that our health and care system, for people who've already got a condition, let's say they've got asthma, that we intervene early to stop that asthma progressing and them needing more and more expensive care, including for social care support. And the NHS and, well, the system, I don't want to lay this just on the NHS, but clinicians are starting to realise they need to look in this area, and we've got to wrap a whole range of different professionals and third sector organisations around that, because often it doesn't make sense for a GP who's obviously a medical doctor and a very expensive resource to be seeing people when a physiotherapist could probably help deal with the problem quicker, cheaper and better, dare I say. And equally, there's a lot of third sector organisations that can provide a lot of support, including connecting people up for transport. So it really is a whole system approach, and it may well be something that we want to describe and talk about in next year's DPH report, because I think that would be the logical conclusion from this report, the children's report that Heather and I did previously, and then the Greater Lincolnshire report.
Thank you. That's yes, there's hope, but the hope and the delivery are easier said than done. Okay, so recommendations are that we thank you and note your reports, which again is an interesting document, and I think adds to the thoughts of how we might improve on what happens now. Okay, that brings us then to the final item, which is the energy infrastructure position for the council. Councillor Davey.
Thank you very much, Leader. I think members are all very aware that Lincolnshire is under a lot of pressure right now from considerable number of NSIP applications for solar, for infrastructure, for connectivity to offshore wind. Some of these have the capacity to alter permanently the landscapes of Lincolnshire. I think it's timely that we should review our position in relation to this. I will add some further comments, but I'm going to ask Andy to take us through the paper and then into discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. The paper is intended to sort of like pick up on three main issues. As Councillor Davies indicated, we're receiving a high number of NSIP applications. At the last count, over 30 of them. And that's obviously creating a significant demand on the planning service, which we've debated previously. The whole NSIP process is designed for the determination of those applications to be through the planning process, ultimately the Secretary of State making the final decision. So it's important that we have a level of confidence and certainty and assurance that the planning policies that we're actually working to are fit for purpose and give us the framework against which to make representations. As Councillor Davies indicated, the long-term impact on our landscape, the cumulative impact on our landscape, the impact on our ecology and habitats and such like are things that are obviously important in the context of how we promote the county of Lincolnshire. So what this report is intended to do is reaffirm that the existing planning policies in our plans are fit for purpose, given how recently most of them have been recently adopted or been through review processes, and that provides the framework for Neil McBride and his planning team to make those appropriate representations and guide and support the public
who again are consultees to the NSIT process, so they've got the confidence that they are framing their responses in a way that carry weight when the inspectorate are advising, ultimately advising the Secretary of State. So the first issue is about that assurance that our existing policies do provide that against the evidence base of how important the best and most versatile agricultural land is to the economy of the county, and again balancing the energy security debate against the food security debate. So as I say, just to reiterate that our existing policy base creates that framework and should give confidence in the way that we are able to make those representations accordingly. Second point I just pick up on is that whilst those applications are with us, we can't assume the outcome of the process. And it is therefore normal and good practice for the planning officers when dealing with developers of any description to also maintain a dialogue on what are the benefits that could come accrue from development if it was actually to go ahead. So again, the report identifies the key areas where we believe it is appropriate for officers to be continuing to negotiate with the developers, to reflect the need to reduce energy emissions from existing businesses, existing houses, and to address issues such as fuel poverty. It's also tied into the fact that we also know there are challenges in terms of some of the connections points, the grid capacity. So again, it provides the opportunity to actually look at some of the solutions that might be needed and can be funded through the sort of community benefit to actually make sure that future growth can actually take place. And then the third point in the report is to reiterate in the context of the changes to the government policy position on onshore wind, that it's a timely moment for the council to just reiterate the position that was reaffirmed back in February of 2021 in terms of the long-standing concern about the impact of onshore wind on the landscape and the setting of the county. So again, this is just intended to just bring that back to people's focus and attention, and again provide a framework against which representations can be made by our planning team and residents if there are significant onshore wind proposals coming forward. To date, there haven't been, but obviously in that the legislation only changed earlier this autumn. Thank you.
So thanks for that, Andy. Just to sort of take us through the various bits and pieces of technology. Firstly, onshore wind, that we're not changing our position. It is as per the full council resolution, and that we will not support onshore wind unless it's in micro renewable form that supports local business or local farm, for instance, with a grain dryer. That is what we would be happy to support. In terms of solar, we're all very aware that we have the UK Food Valley centred on Lincolnshire, the importance of Lincolnshire as the food producer for the nation, and the protection of good quality agricultural land is critical. I sometimes worry that government is so obsessed with its 2050 ambition that it's lost sight of some of the other things that are also important and critically important at a local level to people, to communities and business. So the policy position that we are proposing is that we will not support any solar on grade 1, 2 or 3A land at all, and that we would only really look at 3B for an enabling application to allow access to poorer quality land or brownfield land. So that is where we stand there. Members are obviously very aware that there are major proposals for further connectivity of the giant offshore wind farms into the UK, and there are plans for a potential pylon line through Lincolnshire, which is expected to be announced in January. Over the last few years, I've worked with the team, and we've managed to get the 3 big projects that have already come forward, which is the Viking Link and Tritton Knoll. Those are both undergrounded through Lincolnshire. They've come on shore and they've gone straight into their substations without any visible signs existing. Now those projects have been delivered. And the next one, Outer Dowsing, have just agreed to do the same. So I'm very clear that we should be very supportive of offshore wind being connected, but it should be done in a way that is either underground or offshore in terms of that connectivity, because the value of tourism down the Lincolnshire coast is about 800 million a year. is so significant. Putting an industrial line of structures through that will cause immense harm, and compensation will never meet the losses caused by it. So I think we've got some challenges going forward, but I think we have got a very clear and strong message to government about the role of Lincolnshire for food, for tourism, for place, and how we use our place and the way it looks to attract investment. So I think I would commend adoption of this as a formal position for our planning officers to respond to all applications in the NSIP process. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? Yes, Councillor McNally.
Thank you, Leader. Just in terms of how legal are these sort of documents within the planning process? You know, can we be challenged on this or not?
So that's why the purpose of the report is to provide the assurance that our representations will be based on the planning documents that have already been through the examination process, those policies that are existing in our own waste and minerals local plan, and all of the district local plans provide significant emphasis on the importance of the best and most versatile agricultural land upon which you could then actually make that representation. As they are planning-based decisions, my professional advice was if it was just a resolution of the authority to go down that route, it wouldn't carry the same weight as actually basing those comments and views based on the actual planning policies that are in place.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to put my support behind this, really. We're having so much solar in my particular area and it being a real concern to my residents. I just wanted to say thank you for the officers and for Colin on leading on this and making sure that hopefully we can have appropriate use of solar across Lincolnshire rather than this widespread try and catch all and make a profit before anything else approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor McNally again.
Thank you, Leader. Just one last thing. The seeking community benefits, I think that's like highly important. I mean, I think one of the first sort of wind farms was at Connie's home, sort of my end, and there was no community benefit whatever. It was just sort of, that's it, you're having it, dumped on your landscape. What we have seen in recent times is where people have objected, but then there's been a community benefit for the sort of local surrounding area, where they've done village halls, you know, got footpaths to link the villages together. You know, while we should be objecting, we should also be looking at what can we get out of this if it does eventually just get dumped on us and we have to accept it. What is the best outcome in all cases?
Yeah, I mean, I think on that, I mean, I think that the community benefits that different developers propose are often very radically different, ranging from not a lot to quite involved. And I think it would be, we are probably well placed as covering the whole of Lincolnshire to try and have a consistent approach. I know certainly there's been applications in my division. I think parish councils struggle to start with to get there, to understand about the community benefits and to understand how to do that. And I think most developers are willing to have that conversation, but in an ideal world, it would be nice to have a consistent approach across the whole county so that all planning authorities who do that all have a sort of template, if you like, to say, well, this is the sort of thing you could go for, and there are choices. Is that possible, Andy?
So a consistency of approach is to be commended. The issue is that the benefits should have a local focus. So in terms of actually what those benefits look like, do need to be influenced by what the particular needs, challenges are. So again, if we go back to the previous item in terms of Derek's report, we know there are differences in terms of the needs of different sectors of the population around the county, and therefore, depending on where some of these facilities are being proposed, we would perhaps sort of tailor the ask accordingly, but making sure that the same sort of value comes from each of them is important, rather than, to use Councillor McNally's words, sort of being dumped on with little gain or little benefit. There needs to be a level playing field in terms of making sure that there's an equality at that level.
I mean, I think, for example, there should be an expectation that the community benefit is local. Of course, obviously you can, you know, as we know with planning applications, you could actually say it's a local planning authority. Well, the benefit could be, I know my planning authority in terms of social housing, they define it as the whole of the district as the community benefit, and then local residents say, well, hold on, we're having this and we're not going to benefit. So I think I would welcome this, and also I think particularly welcome the cumulative impact issue, because again I think we're uniquely placed across, because obviously if looking at the local planning application you're looking at just that, and I think somebody needs to say, well, hold on, there's just getting too many around here, and I think that is probably our role to do that, because it'd be more difficult for it's certainly where their district boundaries are to you could have, well, we know there are certain areas where there's 3 different districts meet, and guess what, there's a lot of applications going on the boundaries, because you know it doesn't look so bad when you're doing it. So I think that's a useful paper. So and the recommendations there on page 205 are basically in summary, as Councillor Davey has outlined, that's what we're agreeing to. Is that agreed then, please? All in favour? You show. Thank you. With that, I conclude the meeting. Thank you for your attendance.